Hey there, it's Joe Simons, like diamonds, one of the co-founders here at Salt Strong. We just filmed another awesome podcast episode for you. This is one of the biggest mistakes many anglers make, especially anyone who's fishing with artificial lures, but even in live bait. And we know that because we asked all the fishing guys. We asked many of our friends, some of the other captains that we do some work with, and all of them said this was the number one reason that people on their boat, regardless of level, even some people who've been fishing 30, 40, 50 years their entire life, this is the number one reason people are missing fish when you're in a feeding zone. So check it out. Enjoy. Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons here.
And Luke Simons.
Lukey. We're back for another Fish Strong podcast episode. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about probably one of the number one things that is costing anglers, probably a lot like you, missing fish. It's one of the number one reasons people actually miss fish when you're in a feeding zone. And this is not just our little theory. This is something that every single fishing guide we've asked has backed this up. And what is it, Luke?
It's a statistical fact too when you really talk about it. But it is casting.
Yes,
it is something that is rarely talked about, and we're not talking about just how to cast, right? Not like the pure basics. It's all about putting everything together, right? Can you put together it's all about factoring in the wind, the current. If a fish is moving, if you're sight fishing, or if you're just smart casting, covering air. So it's really just about the science and art of casting. Are you doing it correctly and efficient?
I think it's one of these things, kind of like golf. Everyone's always interested about the drive. Even though you could kind of say casting really far, like out casting all your friends is kind of like out driving everyone, but they're not the same. They're actually the opposite. And I believe what's so important about golf, what makes or breaks a good golfer, is that short game. It's the putting game, and that's really what the casting is, right? Isn't it? And once again, this is not our theory. What's funny, remember the very first person we asked, at least that I remember, was Captain Mike Goodwine. We're out in the boat with him, and we're like, Mike, what's like the number one thing you see people messing up on? Like, what's the number one reason people are missing fish on your boat? And what did he say without even hesitating?
Yeah, zero hesitation. He said casting. He's like, if only the people I had, my clients, could cast better, they would all catch more. And it was without a doubt, and that makes sense too, right? I mean, if you think about it, right, if you're in a good spot, it's he or she who can cast the best, who can put their bait in front of the most fish, the best way possible. They're going to catch the most fish. It's really something that's hard to argue against, but it's just rarely talked about. So thought, hey, let's talk about it in a podcast.
Yeah, and just so you know, Captain Mike and all the other people that we asked, including Captain C. Richardson, these other captains and guides, they weren't just talking about newbies. They were talking about you. They were talking about me. They were talking about people who've been fishing their whole lives. I mean, 20, 30, 40 years. And it was both being able to cast far enough, because obviously every time a fishing guide, or you yourself, every time you have to position yourself another foot closer to a fish, that's one more foot closer that they might feel your presence, that they might get spooked. If you got to get an extra 10 feet closer, man, you're killing your chances of actually spooking that fish and having it feel you and just feeling some presence and just that something's not right. And it also goes for not being able to cast accurate. A lot of that is going to be just on the water experience, right? A lot of that, Luke, does come from just practice. But there's a whole second part of it which comes down to mechanics, and we're really going to hammer the mechanics, because we can't hammer practice here on a podcast or YouTube video, but we can talk a little bit more about the mechanics, and you talk about it really well. It's not just the mechanics one time. You got all these variables you have to think of real time when you're out in the boat, which way the wind's going, which way the current's going, which way the fish is facing, exactly where you want that lure or where you want that bait to land. And I'll tell you a quick little story. So while we were filming Trout Mastery with Captain CA, you and Uncle Nicky had gone off and you guys were filming some stuff with the drone, and I was up on the bow there, like locked and loaded, ready to go with the soft plastic, and CA is poling. So this man is like, and it's windy, like he is poling, he's having to like use every bit of it to get me in this perfect spot, and he sees it first. He's like, Joe, there's a snook right there, like 11 o'clock. He's like, just go a few feet in front of it, And guess what? I freaking cast it. Wind's there, boom, lands right on top of the snook's head. Spooks him. I obviously missed the fish. And like, that was the first time I was like, ugh. CA was talking about guys like me. I was like, I literally just blew that thing. And that was just because I wasn't thinking about it. I did it real quick, and then boom, didn't factor the wind or anything else. And it literally plopped right on top of his head. And so we've all been there. We've all spooked fish. And that was one, had I just thought about it a little bit more and thought a little bit more about the mechanics and exactly where I wanted to place that thing, I probably could have had a nice snook and then press CA versus him sitting there probably rolling his eyes saying, oh boy, just like all my clients.
Look at that Guggen. Look at that Guggen. Yeah, it's bad enough. Just missing a fish is terrible, right? Like, especially when you see it. It's sight fishing, in my opinion, is the ultimate. I love it. But it's bad enough when you like miss a fish on a bad cast, when you put yourself there. But when you have somebody else, either choosing the spot or literally pulling you there with their own energy, that's pretty bad. Sorry to hear about that, Joe.
Yeah. Well, in general, we spend so much time and so much energy on spots. Before we got on this call, what were you doing? You're looking at maps, right? Yep. You're looking at online maps. I mean, we spend so much time and energy finding the ideal spots to find the honey holes, the feeding zones. And yet there's nothing worse or dumber, really, to get out there and be able to present your lure, your bait, or whatever you're fishing with in front of something and blow it because of a bad cast. So we've harped on that. Let's talk about how we can fix that and kind of what you've learned. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there. Like what helps you? Is it your little dart method? Well, no, we're going to talk about that today. I mean, what do you think is the most beneficial in terms of the mechanics and the thought process when you're casting?
Well, I guess before we end this, we also need to talk about equipment too. So the equipment used is a really big factor, and actually much bigger than I previously thought. I've been doing some casting tests with like mono versus braid, which we know that braid's going to cast further, but how much further does it cast? So I tested that out. Most recently, I did a 10-pound braid versus a 20-pound braid. All else considered equal, and the difference there was shocking. And so we can't leave out the actual equipment that we're using, because the rod, all that makes a big difference. But as far as the technique, just small alterations can make a big difference. And I know, a lot of us, we've been fishing for a long time. We're all a little bit, I guess, proud of that, and so we would never admit that we're a bad caster, right? Like, if somebody asked me if I was a good caster, I would say, yeah. And then, do you get the cast perfect every time? Like a lot of it, I would say, yeah, of course. But the answer is no, right? We all make mistakes. It's impossible to be a perfect caster. And we all need to accept that and understand it. And once you do, then it's okay. Then you're more open to thinking about making some slight alterations.
Yeah, it's just like the golf analogy. We'll go back to that. It's just like putting, right? Putting is where you make or break your game. No one's a perfect putter. Even the very best in the world miss, but the very best are also really, really consistent. And that's all that this is about, right? No one, like even I saw him miss a couple, but overall, that dude is consistent. I mean, he is an amazing, amazing caster. He's so fluid, and he's just so on spot. And one is because he's practiced. He spends a lot of time in the water. But two, he's got the mechanics down. He knows exactly how he's going to cast depending on the wind and the velocity. I mean, everything. I mean, he's got it so dialed in, just like you do.
Yeah, and so I believe, just like anything else, if you're not thinking about it, you're not going to improve it. So, like, if you're not testing things, you're not going to improve. And so again, just like before, like even knots, right? Like when we first started Salt Strong, we were trying to brainstorm. Okay, like what kind of tips can we do? And I just thought an easy one. Okay, let me just start tying knots and testing them out and actually showing some data on which knots are stronger than others. And in reality, I was just there to prove that my knots were the best, right? Like in my mind, I've been using these knots forever, even on tournaments. And so I was 100% sure in my mind that my knots were going to beat all the others, and I was going to show how great my knots were. In reality, my knots got smoked. They got smoked by, like, the FG knot, for instance, was the first one that totally shocked me. And I've been using line-to-line knot. I was doing the Bimini twist with the Bristol knot, also known as no-name knot, thinking that was the best because that's what people told me. Never once did I actually test it myself, which I realize now is a big mistake. And so I saw some YouTube video about the FG knot. It was like a super thin knot, and I was like kind of laughing at it. I was like, there's no way this one's going to win. This is going to be a fun one to test. And sure enough, the FG knot beat it the very first time I ever tied the FG knot. And I've been tying that other one for years. So anyhow, so now just from doing that one little test, I have a line strength that's 30. It's not just barely stronger. It was 30% stronger. So now again, just after a simple little test, I now have a line, overall line strength that's 30% stronger than it was just by making one little alteration, just by doing one test. And the same thing goes with casting, right? Like just testing that 10-pound line versus 20-pound line. The 10-pound line was casting over 20% further than the 20-pound line. So knowing that, if you really want to cover like a big grass flat where you don't have to have a strong line, right? Like you can even catch some really big fish on 10-pound line.
Yeah.
Just knowing that you can just switch to a rod or a reel that has 10-pound line in those sort of conditions, just by doing that one switch, you don't have to change your cast, you don't have to change anything else, and you're going to be casting 20% or more further than you would otherwise.
Yeah, that's a great one. So line one, let's talk about the rod. I don't remember who you said this to, but I remember being nearby and hearing it and then asking you about it later. I was like, that kind of makes sense, but I never heard this before where you're like, Joe, I would rather take a $250 rod and a $20 reel all day long versus the $250 reel and just some crummy rod. And yet that's what most people are fixated on, including me for a long time back in college. I would go buy, I remember those really expensive reels that I would buy, then I would just pick up some random Bass Pro rod. Nothing is Bass Pro, but I would just get some random rod. I would not spend any time researching that rod, and I would spend hours testing and researching the reel, and you completely like blew that out of the water. You're like, man, the reel is irrelevant. Like the rod's doing all the work, both casting, feeling, everything, setting the hook. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rod.
Yeah, I think we've all been through that. I was the same way. I was only caring about the reel. I wanted to have like the fancy reel, and then it'd be okay, like whatever rod could come with it. And if you could find the reel that you wanted on a combo, right, where the rod was already there and the rod was gonna be a discount, then done, right? So what do you got there showing?
Oh, that's
rod reel,
another expensive Stratic CI4, but and it's this is a really nice. This is that one Ouija got.
Oh yeah, that's an awesome rod.
Yeah, but anyhow,
custom.
I was just showing. This is another example where way too expensive reel. All of this thing is super light and super nice.
Yeah, they are nice, but and it really a big factor is the application, right? How are you going to be using it? For me, I do mostly artificial fishing, and so I'm doing a lot of casting. And so for me, the rod is what I really want to focus on, because the rod, for artificial lures, if you can't cast the lure, if you can't get the lure to the fish, you have to work the lure and then get the strike, feel the strike, set the hook. Every one of those things I just talked about, the rod is a core centerpiece. And in all of those, the reel has very little to do. Very little to do. It retrieves line, obviously. They do have to retrieve line, but pretty much all reels now, unless they're just super old or if they've just been sitting in saltwater for a while, they're all going to be pretty smooth. And some are smoother than others, yes, but the smoothness is rarely going to be a factor one way or the other. It might feel a little bit better, but it's not going to be a game changer. But if you have just a bad rod and you can't deliver the lure to where it needs to be, which is the rod's purpose, and if you can't feel the strike, which again is the rod's purpose, if you can't set that hook and get a good hook set, which the rod is a primary contributor, you're not going to catch fish. But on live bait, so live bait fishing is a little bit different, where in live bait fishing, the bait does a lot of that work, right? So you could just technically get up current of your location and just drift a bait back. And then the bait's swimming, the bait's bait's providing the action. The bait's actually swimming to where the fish are, right? The bait will do will get itself where it needs to be to get eaten, unfortunately for it. But so live bait fishing, the rod is less important than artificial lure fishing. And with live bait, sometimes you catch a little bit bigger fish. So I can understand people who are mostly live baiters who do, do invest in the more expensive rod or more expensive reels relative to the rods. But for those who use artificial lures, for me personally, I would, as Joe said before, I would much rather have a really nice rod paired with like a little kid's, little Zebco reel, than like just the best reel on the market paired with like a little kid's fishing rod. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So let's talk about, while we're on the rod topic, using the rod as a lever. It's something that I see you do, and maybe we could talk about your dart method, if you will. Let's talk about using that rod as a lever, and it's something that all the pros know that. We're not talking about something that's just revolutionary that you created, but there's so many people that don't do it. I mean, I see them, they're literally taking their entire body and like it shakes the boat, and of course that's creating all kinds of vibrations out there, and sometimes even a hole slap depending on how much movement you have. And we've all been guilty of it when we just want to nail it out there, but that all comes down to mechanics. And if you watch some of that slow motion stuff you have, I mean, your entire body, like your chest, your shoulders, your back, it doesn't move at all. The entire thing is in your wrist, and then you're letting the rod do all the work for you, right? It's basically a lever.
Yeah, again, that all goes back down the rod. You need to have a nice rod to do that, obviously, but when you do it properly, you can make an extremely long cast, longer than most people do, without doing much body movement at all. As Joe said, I mean, I just kind of learned it over the years, and it was really out of necessity. When I was doing those tournaments, I was very competitive in that, so I would go out pre-fishing, the day or two before, stay out there all day long, and then fish all day, tournament day, making hundreds and hundreds of casts. And so it just gets tiring if you're not doing it properly. So I just over the years, I kind of just kind of stumbled onto it, but it all takes into account physics, right? So I start my cast with the back cast. So really like fly fishing. That's kind of how I got it from. And so on my back cast, the back cast is really where I get the power from. I basically load the rod. So with the back cast, I basically start with my rod pointed exactly where I want to go, pointed to the target, and then I go up and I stop it about perpendicular. And then I let that lure swing back around, which bends that rod, and then that's going to be the power I need on the forward cast. So really, if I just stopped at that point and just hardly, basically didn't even do a forward cast at all, the rod would still cast the lure out just by itself, just by that power releasing. But then if I add to that a forward motion, right, just even a short, quick forward motion on the forward cast, that's just going to catapult it forward. So that's the cast that I've, at least in my opinion, is what enables the longest distance while also maintaining a ton of accuracy. Yeah, and that's what I did on that balcony when I cut that snook off the balcony. That's exactly what I was doing. I had to, but fortunately that's how I cast anyhow. So like that cast, it really was, in my opinion, like an easier cast. Like I wasn't moving, usually I'm on the paddleboard sight fishing. So I'm used to like moving, I'm going one way and the fish is going the other, and the wind and the tide's doing something else. So in that scenario, I was not moving. The snook wasn't moving. It was sitting there, and all I had to do was just not spook the snook. So I could take 10 shots at it if I wanted to. I just had to just not spook the snook. So so in my opinion, it's all about just using the rod as a lever. And the more you do it, the more you think about it, the more you practice it, the better you're going to be. And the best part is the least amount of effort you're going to be exerting.
Yeah, and so for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening via the podcast, you won't, but imagine this. So I'm holding the rod right now, and if you watch Luke, rarely does that rod go like past, as you said, perpendicular. I mean, it's never going way back here. He's never doing one of those things like massive golf swing. And I mean, it's usually just right here, and it's crazy. It's just like, and the thing moves so quickly. And I believe you can see that in the snook video, because you were having to go left hand, which you cast left hand a lot anyways. But you couldn't go backwards. There's literally a wall right there, and so you literally you tipped it forward, you got it moving back, you got the lure back, and then. And that was, a good solid 100 feet. And what's kind of cool, we had, millions of people watch that snook caught from the balcony. If you haven't seen it, go to YouTube and type in snook caught from the third floor balcony, and you'll see Luke there. It was me filming and Luke doing the awesome catching. We had a lot of people start asking, "Hey man, that was amazing! Like, I want to learn how to cast like that. How the heck did you do that?" I mean, some people even called it fake, which is pretty funny.
Some were saying it was totally fake. They faked the moon. Man landing on the moon. They're going to fake that too. Like, what? Who are these people?
Landing on the moon. That was pretty funny. Both of them up there in in terms of importance, catching a snook from the balcony and landing on the moon. I love that analogy. Anyhow, we heard from a lot of people, and so we actually created a course. And this is not for everyone. It's only for people that truly do want to get better. It's just for like that golfer that truly wants to become like the best putter so they can win more often and really beat all their friends, not just outdrive everybody. But it does come with two benefits. One, you are going to learn how to cast at least 10 feet or more, or you don't pay. It's completely free if you don't cast at least 10 feet or more. And if you're interested, just go to saltshore.com. Up at the top, you'll see courses, and there's a little tab for the casting course. We just took it live a little while ago. We had a few people that went through it early, some people that have just been dying to have it. We let them go through it, just kind of give us some feedback, got some awesome testimonials, and everyone that's going through it, it's working for. It's pretty freaking awesome course. So it's called Casting Mastery, and it's all about the mechanics. It's all about, knowing how to cast in all different types of situations, whether you're going around structure, docks, wind, current, etc. So,
yeah, and it's not just about distance. Obviously, distance. If you're out, on a flat and you're blind casting, distance is going to be the biggest factor. Like I do a lot of fishing like that, and if I'm taking out somebody that I've never fished before, I know immediately who's going to catch the most fish in that scenario, because whoever can cast the furthest is going to catch the most. That's just a statistical reality. Obviously, retrieving the lure is a big factor as well. But if you can just get your lure in front of more fish, you're going to catch more fish.
Yeah.
And so getting the longest distance possible is a huge benefit when you're blind casting. When you're just covering a large area. I call it power. A lot of people call it power fishing. We're just moving fast, covering area, covering ground, and the distance is huge. But then, other situations, like if you're sight fishing, rarely do you need a 200-foot cast sight fishing, because you really can't even see that far. You can't see in the water that far. So, when you get a little bit in the shorter distance, then you have to make some alterations to maximize your accuracy. And a lot of it is just to take a smaller swing. So when I'm going for accuracy, I'm doing, instead of like pulling back real hard on the back cast to like really load that rod, I just do like a half one. And then on my forward swing, I just really focus on just getting it, just making sure that my direction is perfect. My direction is spot on. And then I use the rod to get the distance part. So, so you have to make alterations for the shorter cast. And then obviously if you're casting under docks or under mangroves, then it's all about the skip cast. And the course goes into all the technicalities behind it. But in reality, the skip cast, just keep the rod low and just use, the same type of physics, right? You need to get a lot of lure speed, keep a low trajectory, and that lure is going to slide right up under the target.
Oh yeah. You got some really cool footage of that.
Yeah, that's fun too. That's a fun way to fish. I love fishing mangroves and docks because, when you get that hook set, and that's just start of the battle, and then you have about 5 seconds to pull whatever it is out of there before it's got you.
Yeah, I loved one analogy you had in terms of the distance, especially when you are power fishing, on the flats, blind casting, and you talked about, if you can cast 10 feet farther than me, and let's just say in a given hour you're making 20 to 25 casts. Let's just say you're doing 10 to 15 yards or 10 to 15 feet every time. That's a football field of extra distance you're covering every hour. And if we fished an entire 8-hour day, that's 8 football fields of extra territory that you're covering that I'm not. Who the heck do you think is going to catch more fish, right? I mean, that's a lot of extra opportunities, and I don't think people really take that into consideration. I mean, even a 10-foot advantage, every 30 casts, that's an extra football field distance. Yeah. So like the 10 feet, an extra 10 feet, that's not that big of a deal. That's a huge deal. Yeah.
Entire extra football field, and that's not just an extra football field of coverage, that's like the extra football field of like the primo strike zone territory, right? Those fish have the least amount of idea that you're there, and they're going to be the most likely to eat. So that's an extra football. Just a 10-foot extra per cast is an extra football field of strike zone territory, like the best strike zone territory you can ask for. So that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing was on the 10-pound braid versus 20-pound braid test, I did it for like a light lure. I was using weights just to keep the aerodynamics of the lure factor out of the equation. So I was using little weights, and so I did a lightweight and a heavyweight. One to resemble a light lure, and then another one to resemble a heavy lure. And the craziest thing was that, again, just a 10-pound braid to a 20-pound braid, same rod, same reel, same exact weight for each one. And on the light lure, I think the extra distance was like, I think it was 20 something feet. And then on the heavier one, it was over 30 feet. So in the heavier one, so like a heavier lure with 10-pound line, you can cast an extra 30 feet. That's every 10 cast is the extra football field. Well, that's a huge deal.
And that's just talking line.
Yep.
When you actually have the mechanics, like when you see your dart method and you're actually like having better mechanics, it's a whole different. It could be 50. It could be who knows how many feet. I don't want to
it's a big deal.
Make any claims because we can't promise anything. But all we promise in that course is that you will cast 10 feet or farther, and anyone can do it, regardless of your age or how long you've been fishing. You can cast farther if you work a little bit more on your mechanics. Now, if you're a full-time guide or pro, you might not need it. However, we've had a lot of guides who've gone through this stuff. And I think a lot of them are live bait guys that, because we're more heavily focused on artificial, even though we fish both. And a lot of the live bait guys are coming to these courses just because they haven't done that in a long time. Most of their day job is doing that, and a lot of times on the route, they're like, oh yeah, it's just because it's so easy for them to find bait. They're like, yeah, might as well just use live bait. So that's been kind of cool to see some captains go through and give us some kudos. But,
yeah, one email came in yesterday. It's a guy who went through the course. He just got it, I guess yesterday, and he said that he was like, wow, he's been fishing for like 50 years, since he can remember. And he was like, wow, I really didn't think I would like this, but I realized that I've been making a big mistake that's costing me distance. And again, statistically, if anything is costing you any distance at all, it's costing you fish.
Yeah.
So whether you take the course or not, just be very, very mindful of what you're doing in your cast, and just make little small alterations and just see, okay, is that working or is it not? Even on equipment, right? Like the line's a big deal. If you don't need to have heavy line, go lighter. Like even I use 10-pound line most of the time. That's more than enough to handle 40+ inch redfish snook. I caught one. I landed like a 50-pound tarpon with it. It's that line is surprisingly strong. If you have a light line and a good knot, like that FG knot, I used 10-pound braid with a 30-pound leader and the FG knot, and I tested that connection out, and it was breaking at 20 to 23 pounds. So although the braid says 10 pounds, if you have a really good knot, the true breaking strength is going to be way higher than 10 pounds. So again, very, very mild. A lot of people think, oh, it's 10-pound line, that's not enough to catch a big fish, and it definitely is, as long as you're not in air with a ton of structure and a ton of current, because then they're just going to own you. But if it's on the open flat, 10-pound line is plenty for most inshore fish.
Cool. All right, so let's pivot a little bit. We get a lot of people asking about the dart method because we've talked about that in some of our videos. We've kind of already touched on it, but tell everyone what the dart method is. As much as you can. I know you can't review everything. Yeah. Some of it's in the course, but in general, what is your dart method?
Well, it's just hard to. It's for podcasts. It's hard to do.
You can do it. I believe in you, Luke.
But I mean, the best way is to go to our website and see the video on it. I did a video. It's open to the public, and it really shows like a slow mo. We got some really cool slow mo footage of the actual cast, and that's where I kind of dissect. Okay, what's going on? But just for I guess a visual. Audio-based visual. Again, it's all about on the backswing, taking the rod backwards and then just pausing and then letting the weight of that lure kind of wrap around, and then you can feel once that power is built up. There's a point you can just feel it in the rod, and that's when you need to start going forward. That's when you need to start your forward motion, and on the forward motion, it's all about just thinking accuracy. The backswing is all about the power. the forward motion is all about the accuracy. And I like, if I'm doing overhand casts, if I'm say I'm fishing the open flat and I'm just targeting potholes, which is statistically where most of the fish are going to be. I'm just, all I want to do is I just want to hit that pothole, and I want to go over the pothole. Obviously, I don't want to cast in it because that's going to spook the fish. I want to cast over the pothole. So I just do the back cast. I have my rod going up above my head, and I basically have my hand in my sight and the pothole, like kind of like a dart thrower, right? Like they're lining up. They line up the dart. They can see the dart and their target all in one frame. And so my forward swing is literally just like exactly like a dart. And I never realized how close it was till we were looking at that footage, and I was like, wow, it looks like I'm throwing a dart. And sure enough, it does. And you'll be able to see it on our website. I'd go like back and forth where you can see the frame, and it's just like throwing a dart. And again, that way on that forward motion, you're going to hit your target. So you might go long or go short based on the back cast, but that forward cast, if done properly, is going to guarantee that you're going to be on the right line. And just by making sure you get on the right line, that's a big deal. And again, with practice, it's all about the timing, the release timing. But with practice, you'll see that you can get further and further and further while not losing any accuracy.
Cool, that's good. So let's go back to sight fishing, sight casting. We both love it. So you're out there, you're on a flat, you see a nice redfish. Let's just say his head's pointed like left. So if you're looking at him, his head is left, his tail's to your right. How far ahead and to the left are you trying to get your lure or bait?
Well, there's a lot of factors obviously there, but let's use that snook example because that's like the exact thing you talked about. The snook was sitting on a shallow flat. It was aimed left.
I said redfish. We got to pretend that thing's a redfish now?
All right, fair enough. Well, whatever it is, but whatever the fish was. So in that case, this is just one example. So in that case, the fish wasn't moving, I wasn't moving, and so I don't have to be as aggressive, I guess is my point. So the idea with sight fishing, especially if it's clear, calm water, so in that situation, there was very little ripple. The fish wasn't moving, I wasn't moving, so I knew that I could sit there and I could probably make 10 casts if I had to. As long as it didn't spook the fish, no harm done, right? And so my first cast, I purposely went probably like 10 feet over because I was casting from the third floor at this point, which I've never done before. So I just wanted to make sure that my distance variable was working. And so I just casted there, and okay, I realized I had the right distance. And so then it didn't take it. The wind was taking the line back toward the fish. So the lure landed to like 10 feet to the left and maybe 5 feet beyond. And that line kind of wrapped around toward the fish. So on the retrieve, I probably got, I don't know, maybe 6 feet in front of it, 5-6 feet in front of it. And it was clear water, so I thought that it would be able to see it, but it just didn't go. So anyhow, so now I have the distance. Okay, good. I got the distance. Now it's all about getting that accuracy. And I couldn't do the overhand, which I would have known I had the right line. So I was doing that cast on a sidearm thing, like leaning over the balcony. It was very, very awkward type thing. But anyhow, so I finally got the right line, and I knew I had the distance, and it landed perfectly. Could not have been any better. And sure enough, that I didn't spook the snook. Fortunately, it landed probably 5 feet over the snook and about 3 feet. Maybe it landed probably about 4 feet to the left. But that wind was wrapping, arcing that line back towards the snook. So as I was retrieving it, that lure probably got maybe 3 feet in front of it, and that was all that I needed. That snook went out, and it went out and smoked it. So sometimes fish are less aggressive, then you have to get right on their nose. So if it's like a redfish that's tailing, then that redfish it's aimed down. Its eyes are down, pointing down, and it's not going to go 3 feet to grab a lure. It's just not going to see it. So if a redfish is tailing and it's looking to the left, you basically have to cast over it and then retrieve it so that you get really, really close to its face, and preferably with like a scented lure. But so anyhow, long story short, it's really dependent on the variables, right? So how fast are you moving, right? If I'm like on my paddleboard, we use that wind is kind of owning me. It's and I usually get one shot. If I'm on a paddleboard, it's rare that I get more than one shot at a fish unless it's just super calm. So then I have to get aggressive. I have to make sure that this fish better see that lure. So on the paddleboard, I always cast over, but on the paddleboard, I'll rarely go more than like a foot or two to one side or the other. But if I'm on a fixed spot, if I'm waiting, and I know that I have multiple casts, I'll start out far away, and then just make sure that that my distance is good. And so I try to do at least one cast that's conservative, and then next one I'll go for it.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Well, we'll end it on that. For all of you that made it this far, go out and practice your cast. Don't be the guy or gal who's out there and is missing fish. There's just nothing worse. You put so much time in, so much effort to find a good spot. Don't blow it with a bad cast. And if you really want to take your game up a level and see Luke's little dart method and all the cool mechanics and little shortcuts and tips that he's learned to really like leverage it. I mean, even if you're a super skinny person and hardly have any muscle strength, not to say you don't, Luke, but I mean,
what are you saying here?
You can really take this thing farther. And once again, the guarantee is pretty cool. You will cast at least 10 feet or more with every cast after you take this course for the rest of your life, by the way, or you don't pay. Once again, saltstrong.com, up at the top, it's courses. So, Luke.
And the final thing too, back to the equipment. Equipment is a factor, and so for members of that course, they're going to get the first access to the future tests, right? Where I have a lot of different lines I'm testing. Power Pro is what I typically use, but I've got some Suffix, I've got some spider wire, and I'll be doing that same test just again to see if like one brand is like better than another, and I'll report all those findings in there as well. So That's the added bonus for those course participants.
Awesome. Other than that, we will see you all on the next episode. Luke, one more question, Luke.
What's up?
Do you know what day it is?
Wednesday?
Hump Day!
Why did I even answer?
Pow! See you, dude.
Peace.